Welcome back, everyone.
Oh.
Neil, you were so encouraging. So thank you so much for that. You make it possible.
But that's the thing, it is possible. I mean, you know, I started off working in private language schools. From there, I ended up teaching Cambridge exams, first, advanced, and back in the good old days here in the UK where we still had proficiency students, I got to teach proficiency. Then I taught IELTS, and it was that experience. And I think my first job in a university was probably due to the fact that I, at the interview, had prepared and I knew what I was talking about. I admitted what I knew and what I didn't know. I was honest. But the fact that I was also a Cambridge examiner, I think, helped, because they knew that I had a strong background in academic writing, because I've been an examiner for FIRST, for CAE, and also for BEC Higher. So that's another way in that didn't come out in those questions at the end. You examine, you know, sell yourself. And as teachers, we're not always very successful at doing that, I think.
Exactly. And at the beginning, you had a question to the participants, to our attendees, if you remember, Neil, asking them about their context regarding writing, teaching the writing. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, most people here, I mean, there is a little bit of everything. And yeah. In that, I think general English, exams, high stakes exams, as well, IELTS, OAT, so academic writing as well. So we have everyone here. And so to get started, Neil, we had at the beginning a question about anxiety.
Yes.
And teachers being anxious when it comes to teaching academic writing. And it may not even need to be necessarily academic writing, it's just any kind of writing. So why do you think this is so, and what can be done to the level of intensity of our anxiety?
My personal view, and I would love to know what today's attendees think of this, is that it can be answered probably in 3 words. Actually, I can't count, it's 4 words. Fear of the unknown. Because I think if you look certainly at the context for countries where CELTA and Cert TEFL are popular, and I'm a CELTA trainer myself, so I'm as guilty of this as anyone. It's quite unusual for someone at CELTA level to do a writing class in their 6 their 6 hours of PP of observed teaching practice. So I think people come off those kind of courses maybe having never taught a writing class. And if you've never done it, you're going to be frightened of it. I mean, that's human nature. I think also we need to be mindful of the fact that in thinking about academic writing, there is probably quite a lot more that we need to be thinking about than there is when we're talking about writing an email or a postcard to a friend, talking about a holiday you've been on, or inviting them to join you on a holiday, the kind of things we might see in PET and First Certificate. And therefore, you know, I think it's also useful that we are aware that, you know, before we're doing the marathon, the PhD, that actually we need to be thinking about how we do the basics and how we do those well. So I think if there is anxiety, the first thing to do is be honest about it. I was terrified of doing the diploma. I spent years avoiding doing the diploma because I just thought I was going to fail miserably. It was only when my boss turned around and said, go feel the fear and do it anyway, because you don't have any teaching after the end of the month. So you can either go and do the Delta, or you can be unemployed, your choice. So I think, you know, part of it is not having done it, and part of it is not knowing where to start. And that's where colleagues come in. That's where your director of studies comes in. And that's where good writing materials come in. That's my take. I'm not sure if we're getting any responses in chat, but Hedy, how does that correspond to what you think? And also, perhaps if we can ask Gabby to come in here as well, because I know this was, I think it was Gabby who actually asked the question.
Yes, yes. So yeah, I agree with you, because I think this is very often we do not know what to expect. We hear stories from people, mainly from students, and this is very often, oh, I failed this or that exam, and then you just come to the conclusion that it must be something that is so beyond me. And so, but when you really sit down and look into that, then you can see that it's actually doable. So, and
I mean, I guess I got into writing because my final fully observed external observation on my diploma back in 1999 was a writing class. And it kind of, that set me up for loving teaching writing. Gabby, I think you're there.
Yes.
Perhaps give the mic to Gabby. It was your question, I think, Gabby. What are your thoughts on the question and also the answer?
Yeah. Hi, Neil. Hi, Hedy. So you may not agree with me, but I feel, and I also speak from my own experience as a learner when I had to take my proficiency exam years ago, etc., etc. I feel that this anxiety is very much related to the fact that as a teacher who teaches academic writing, you kind of have to go beyond assessing the use of the language. So it's the critical thinking skills. It's the fact that when you help students and you assess their writing, you are having to assess their thinking as well. And very often teachers don't feel in the position to do that. So they feel a little bit like an imposter maybe. And I have to tell you that my own experience as a learner when I was about to take my proficiency test, and I remember we were doing a lot of writing in class, and I really, really resented the fact that the teacher was actually commenting on my thinking problems, or not problems, but my thinking issues in the text, if you will. So it's not, I felt like the job of the teacher is simply stick to the language and assess my language. Don't tell me how to think. Because you see, so this is the problem. And that's why it's so difficult to teach academic writing. And I feel that that's why teachers feel anxious of teaching academic writing, because it really assumes a lot of trust as well, like between the teacher and the students, because students may reject teachers easily. I mean, very often, students who take high-stake exams are academic people themselves. I mean, they already have degrees. What they don't have is the language. Right, so I feel that maybe this is the issue, but I wonder how you feel about it, whether you agree with me or you don't. I was an awful student, I have to say, about anything that was not related to the language. I just didn't feel like the teacher was in the position to do so, to make comments about anything other than the language.
Share my screen. Is that right? Let's have a go, because what I want to do, and as I was looking to one side whilst you were talking, Gabby, I wanted to bring up, and hopefully, Hedy, Gabby, tell me if you and others can see this. Yeah. This is an example of the marking of a pre-sessional essay. And I wanted to show you how that very point that you were making about the kind of the split from the language learning and teaching and everything else is realized. So when I was heading up a pre-sessional writing program at a university here in Wales, I actually got my teachers to mark in two different colors. Red was language, green was everything else. So you'll notice here, would be useful here to have more evidence to strengthen your argument. a rather confusing paragraph, as you seem to mix up causes and effects. Confusing, this paragraph should relate to effects. So yes, absolutely, and I'll come out to share now. I think it is important that teachers realise that when we're working with genuine EAP, that we are looking at a lot more than just language. And I think it is the case that the reason that in the UK that there is an expectation of a certain academic background for the teacher to be at least as high or higher than the level of the student. Now, that doesn't mean to say to help students to write PhDs that you have to have a PhD yourself, but it does suggest that you need to have some familiarity, which is always best through experience, of doing literature reviews, of knowing how to write a literature review, knowing how to think about the chapter organization of a PhD. It's useful if you've done one. I mean, I don't have a PhD. I started one, I didn't finish it. So I think, yes, a lot of teachers are frightened for that very reason. And, you know, they have a choice. You know, we've all been through a pandemic, which has been horrible for all of us. Some teachers, however, have seized the opportunity, much as gallery teachers has facilitated them, by providing CPD. So I think if you're a teacher who wants to get into academic writing, you also need to take on board the fact that there may well be some CPD that you should and need to do in order to have the competencies to be an effective and confident marker. Now, you mentioned critical thinking, and I think it was really interesting when a couple of weeks ago, last week in fact, Steve Hirschhorn gave a fantastic masterclass on decluttering ELT. I've always been a huge Steve Hirschhorn fan. I mean, I can remember when Steve Hirschhorn was Steve Hirsch. We're going back 20 years before he changed his name, when he discovered something about his Hungarian background. But what was really interesting with Steve is that the one thing I was less convinced by was his argument that critical thinking is an encumbrance. It gets in the way of teaching, because I think whilst almost certainly emotional intelligence, emotional thinking at primary level, you know, ELT is faddish, but I actually think, in fact, I would say I am certain that we can teach critical thinking at low levels. And if we believe that language teaching is for developing the ability to communicate effectively for the world of work, the world of travel, the world of study and intercultural communication, I don't know how we can do that without having critical thinking as part of it. Now, that's not necessarily saying that we have to be, as language teachers, able to identify logical fallacies, which is a part of critical thinking. And I always struggled with, you know, the differences between straw man and so on. And there's many critical fallacies, but I do think the true EAP teacher working in a university context or working with university students as a freelancer needs to know a lot more than about the difference between the present perfect and the past simple. It's quite a long answer, but in essence, yes, I agree with you. And yes, I think that added expectation is inevitably going to put some people off. But fine, yeah. You know, I don't want to teach general English anymore. That's fine.
Yeah. Yes, but the truth is, yes, the truth is that, yeah, in order for students to feel that the teacher's assessment is not arbitrary, right? It is really a huge, it's a matter of trust, yeah. And it's a matter of, well, I think trust mostly. Yeah. So as an academic or as a teacher of academic writing, you really need to kind of earn this trust as well, because if there is no trust, then I can't see how a teacher can be successful teaching academic writing.
Trust in the teacher, but also trust in the system. So when it came to the pre-sessional, for which I had responsibility for writing, I trained all of my staff and ran ongoing standardization, moderation meetings throughout the course. And I sampled all of the teachers' marking. And I sampled not only their language marking, but all the other areas. And critical thinking was one of the areas that was explicitly examined. So yes, I think, you know, you need to, if you're working in EAP, you need to go the extra mile. And to be honest, if you've done an MA in ELT, you've pretty much already gone the extra mile because you've been a master's student yourself, you know the expectations.
Yeah. And just to add to what Gabi was, I think it's the way we, like, yes, knowing our subject, knowing what we teach is super important, but also it's how we give feedback. So we really need to be sensitive. So very often, exactly, so you give feedback to the students and the students feel that they are judged and their ideas are not considered adequate enough. And so we need to explain why, what we mean by, you know, those comments, for instance. Very often it's not clear for the students and they take it wrong. So it's also about how we give feedback. But I also think that it's like, in a sense, sometimes I think it's the teacher's role as well to teach students how to think, like guide them. So when you write an essay, for instance, and you need to follow a structure, and you need to have one main idea which you need to expand on, for instance, and so you cannot just have like a shopping list, for instance, in that sentence. So in this sense, I think that we also need to teach our students to think in a logical way that fits into the requirements of an exam, for instance.
So, I mean, as an example of that, that essay that I shared a few moments ago, this is, and hopefully you can see on screen now, it's a little bit small,
yeah.
But basically this was a matrix. So you have the learning outcomes in different areas here. Then you have the grading from A to E, and the student is then highlighted and where they fitted. Yeah. And although you can't see it on this form, what then happened is the students, in terms of feed forward, were asked to decide how would they move from a C to a B. So if a C is satisfactory use of summary and paraphrasing skills, and they want a B, mostly accurate use of summary and paraphrasing skills, they would work with a partner to look at times where they had paraphrased successfully or not, which would have been highlighted by a correction code, and they could have then worked on how they could do it. So in other words, this rubric was nothing more than yes, it was summative at the end of a very detailed process of writing, but also it led into feed forward assessment for learning, and an assessment as learning was metacognitively. Students then considered, what do they need to do to get better? What resources were required, and so on. I noticed that we've got a question coming in from Deepak in Nepal, who's talking about the condition of English language teaching in Nepal. Shall we take this question now, or do we want to?
Yeah, let's do it now.
Deepak, if you can join us, but if you can please focus specifically on academic writing, as that is the topic for today. And you know, what are your thoughts about academic writing teaching in your country, and how does that reflect wider concerns for ELT?
Deepak, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Neil, and all the participants. Yes,
good afternoon.
Yes. And it's me, Deepak Chonglagai from Nepal. And I am a MPhil scholar, including lecturer of management in Nepal. And I actually want to put here my opinion that in Nepal, we are facing different challenges in this English language. Why? Because we are not English speaking country. Just I want to know from you, Mr. Neil, from you, how can we write normal general sentences like our countries, non-English speaking countries? Thank you, Neil. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak. I mean, yours, I think, is a very big question, isn't it? So I'm not sure that I will be able to give you an answer that covers everything. I think there's probably a PhD in what you're asking about. But it strikes me that there are perhaps a couple of points we can look at, some of which are more directly relevant to today's topic than others. First of all, I would strongly resist any sense of Nepal or any other country, because its teachers are not natives, as being in some way, shape or form a deficit model, because I think we must resist that. It is absolutely vital that we consider that good language teachers are measured not by their L1 and an accident of birth, but by the quality of their teaching. So therefore, I would encourage you to think about the quality of the teaching in Nepal, not the fact that the teachers are necessarily perhaps not all L1 speakers. In terms of making this move from sentence to paragraph and paragraph to writing, then I would suggest that there are good teaching materials out there which actually do just that. Dorothy Zemak, who's based in America, has written a series of books. One is called From Sentence to Paragraph. There's another one From Paragraph to Essay. And this actually, in fact, it scaffolds the process of the movement from what a low-level learner can do. And okay, the CEFR, the Common European Framework of Reference, is essentially a white middle class, yeah, I'm afraid to say so. It's a white middle class European construct. It's not perfect, but I actually think it's pretty good. And, you know, if we recognize that students at A1 and A2 will be working at the sentence level, then I think we need to kind of break that down. So I would encourage you to do two things. Number one, have a look at the Common European Framework for Reference. And that will show you what the expectations are of what students can do at those levels, A1, A2, B1, B2. In terms of teaching materials, I believe that most of Dorothy Zemak, and I'll put her name into chat for everyone, majority of her work, I think, is published by Macmillan. It's beyond the scope of what I can do to say whether her works are available in Nepal. They may be available on the internet as ebooks. So I would have a look at her work because I've seen it used very successfully in universities where we've got levels, student levels who are very low B1 or even an A2, who are aiming over the course of a year or 2 years to become master's level students, needing a B2 or C1 level, that they can then make that move away from the word to the sentence. So it'll look at like subject, verb, object, complement in a simple sentence. It'll look at the use of simple conjunctions and but. Then it will look at the use of compound sentences using simple relative phrases. So I think this is how we build things up. It's a bit like building a house. Start with strong foundations, start with the walls, build them up slowly. I hope that answers your question, Deepak. I think there's quite a lot of other questions to look at. But thank you for your contribution. And I hope that gives you some food for thought. Some comments in chat which will help you. Thanks.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Deepak. Hedy, back to you.
Thank you, Deepak. Yes, I have a question here regarding academic writing. It's even just saying this, it's, you know, it sounds so serious. And so, you know, hearing academic writing, I can just, I don't know, see students sitting separately at a table, you know, writing individually. So, but does it need to be an individual activity? Does it exclude speaking and collaboration?
I think there's an elephant in the room, Hedy, and you've not used the word fun. And I actually think academic writing can and should be all of those things. It should be collaborative. It should be interactive. It should be students working together, as well, of course, as times where you're writing on your own. First and foremost, the feeling in the room should be one of jolliness, students enjoying themselves, students having fun. And I think you've, in the examples that you've given, have provided a nice list of ways in which we can bring energy and fun into the writing classroom. Now, for me, I'm not suggesting that every single minute of a 60-minute lesson should be students being noisy and laughing. But there should be some of that there. And perhaps we need to kind of think about, if we're planning our lessons, be thinking about, have we got that nice mixture? So I think the teaching of academic writing has undergone in many countries a bit of a revolution in the last year and a half because of the pandemic. In the EAP pre-sessional that I managed, the writing module, typically what would happen is the students would they'd work in 3-week kind of areas. So there'd be 3 weeks on one type of essay, 3 weeks on a different type of essay, another 3 weeks on another type of essay, then 3 weeks maybe looking at a project. And within that 3-week period, there would be maybe a week of teacher input, lessons, learning about a cause and effect essay, looking at paragraph structure, looking at topic sentences, looking at thesis statements, looking at supporting evidence, looking at concluding sentences, and all of this kind of stuff. And then there would be 2 weeks of writing. Now, in those second 2 weeks, a lot of the time was students writing in class. And actually, I don't think there's anything wrong with students writing in class, as long as it's not an easy lesson for the teacher, because that's never a good thing. So for the writing in class, my teachers were taught that they should be always available for students on demand if they had particular questions, but also they would spend time rotating around all of the students in the class, looking at their work, maybe marking a paragraph, giving them feedback, suggesting what they should be looking at, and making that generative feedback. So you've got some problems with your language here. Let's look and see what the problem is. Can you now fix it in this paragraph and in the other ones? I think with online, that's changed. And I think now, if we've got students doing 5 hours of academic writing a week, probably what you want to do is getting students doing quite a lot of the actual writing in their own time, not class time. Class time is much more about workshops, and that can be collaborative editing and getting feedback from their peers. Because if you've got a pre-sessional that's global with students in different time slots, they won't necessarily be in the time, together outside a class and be able to, do that peer checking together other than in class time. So I think, yes, we could consider how we use the class time effectively to capitalize on what having the students there and then looks like.
Yeah, exactly, because there are teachers who think that doing writing in class is just a waste of time. So others disagree completely with that. And I think there is room for both. So at the beginning, it might be better if they do it together. What I usually do is that I'm really a fan of working collaboratively. So students can work in pairs or even small groups. and especially until the point, until they get familiar with the structure or the format of a certain type of writing, and so they can do it together.
Yeah.
To generate ideas, you know, put the sentences on paper, put the words on paper. So, and then what they do is that when they go home, their task is to finish that particular in-class writing. They can just continue what they started working on, or they can just write their own as well, but they already have a sample. And so we do everything step by step. So there's a little bit of, you do this on your own, let's say in pairs or in a small group, and then we bring the whole class together, and then we take the next step again. You do it, you know, in pairs or small groups, and then again we discuss what you know, what you've been doing. So it can be done collaboratively, and it can be so much fun.
Yes. If we think about a previous workshop, which I've not seen, I'll be entirely honest, but which I do want to be looking at, which was overt teaching. The point was being made about making the students aware of exactly why they're doing something at any one given point in the lesson. So I think, you know, it's a very nice way of making sure they can justify what they're doing rather than having an easy class. You go and write for 40 minutes and I'll just sit here and watch you. Never a good idea. But, you know, this next activity, I'm going to ask you to write a paragraph collaborative with your partner. The purpose of this is that I want you to be looking at each other's ideas, assessing them together. You might all want to write the paragraph individually and then compare them and take the best elements from each and then put that into a final paragraph. And then that's going to go up on the wall, or it's going to go up on Padlet, so that other groups can see it and give you feedback. So I think perhaps we owe it to our students to be overt, perhaps. I think we do owe it to our students to be overt about why they're doing what they're doing at any one given stage. So in a writing class, who said that we couldn't have a class debate? Because one of the very early questions was, I'm always worried that my students don't have anything to write about. They've got nothing to say. Well, okay, if that is the case, they're not going to write anything much at all. So actually, we can either just say, oh, my students have got nothing to say, or we can think, well, all right, how can I give them something to say? We've got the whole world of the internet out there. We've got TED Talks. We've got all sorts of access through Google Scholar to write free academic peer-reviewed journals if your students are at that level. So there is no lack of material, and that's what course books are for as well. But then having a class debate or a class role play or a balloon debate, you're going to write an essay about the causes and effects of hot desking in the so why did hot desking become a thing? What were the effects of hot desking? Well, people felt that they were no longer part of a team, they were only part of a group. Actually, rather than having a role as a person, you have a role as an idea.
Yes.
And then you put forward your concept.
Yeah.
And then you have the balloon debate, and you throw the argument, critical thinking, Gabby, you throw out of the hot air balloon the ideas that don't stack up.
Yeah.
And then critical thinking, you might go back to the ideas that didn't stack up and just say, how can we change these ideas and make them valid?
Yeah.
Now, to me, a balloon debate is quite a fun way of having a discussion. But no one ever said to me, oh, you can't do that. Today they're writing. Well, what does an academic writer do if they're a researcher? They go and look at other people's work. They critique it.
Yeah.
So all you're doing in the balloon debate is bringing the information in via a fun classroom activity rather than a dry reading. I think most academic researchers, given the choice, might quite like the idea of a balloon debate.
Yeah, yeah. And this idea is great just to demonstrate to students that you do not, because they often feel anxious, as somebody has mentioned that in the chat room as well. So it's not only teachers, but students as well. And often because they, oh my God, I don't have any ideas. and because they think that they need to have to list 100. No, you need to narrow it down. So with this Ballon debate, you modeled and demonstrated to them that you only need 1 or 2.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And it makes it look simpler, and then you are able to expand on those 2 ideas. You know, just explain what you mean by that main idea, and then give an example of that. And I have one more question to help teachers a little bit, because you know we usually have most of the time just a limited time to spend together with our students in the classroom. What can we do to help them outside the classroom? So what can we trust them with that they can do without, you know, without us being there watching them, you know? So what are these things?
I think the first thing to do is at the very beginning of a program, actually present them with a blended solution and explain to them what's going to happen in class and what the expectations are of what they need to do outside of class. Make the point to them, you're not going to make as much progress as you could if you only allow class time as your learning time. I increasingly, when I'm developing programs, I actually think about the asynchronous synchronous blend, and I present that to them as the whole picture. So the students get given that this is what your homework is going to be this week, and this is what we're going to be doing in class, and this is how they complement one another. I think students being told to do homework without seeing the bigger picture is always a bit dangerous. So I think if the students can see what the finished jigsaw puzzle looks like and how each individual piece of the puzzle contributes to the overall picture, then they're perhaps more tolerant of why we're asking them to do what they do. We then need to praise the students who do it well. I think we need to give them lots of praise for getting homework in on time. I mean, I've had a group recently who are preparing for OET. If they get the exam scores they need, they will become fully fledged nurses in the UK. They will start earning more money. That's a big motivation. But their homework was a bit kind of poor. And I was very nearly about to make the mistake of getting quite kind of angry with them. And I just thought, hang on, these are nurses working in the NHS in healthcare roles. They're not earning as much as they should be. They're probably treated poorly by some other people within the hospital. You need to actually use positive reinforcement to make them feel good about doing their homework rather than telling them off for not doing it. And you know what? Overnight, that changed the dynamic. So I think let them understand what they need to do for homework, why they're doing it, encourage them, praise them, and that starts to help. That's with adults. Teenagers, sometimes it works. If you've got disaffected teenagers, it's not going to work so well. But that's not really what we're here to talk about today, primarily.
Yeah.
Does that accord with your view, Hedy?
Yeah, it's that inner drive. It's very important. Gabi is commenting in the chat room that this is overt teaching. It is. So it's being transparent with our students and involving them in the learning process, telling them why we do things. It's so important because I think this is what meaning is and purpose is what drives us.
Yes.
And so when I do not find any meaning or purpose in what I do, I just give it up because I'm not here to waste my life.
Yeah.
I'm here to do something, and when I do why I do something, it can be so motivating, actually. So I find it very, very important.
Looking forward to the next Gallery Teachers webinar masterclass that I'll be doing, which is on speaking. The very first thing I'm going to be saying is, if you're asking your students to speak because you want them to practice a grammar activity, then actually it's not a speaking activity at all. There is no motivation in speaking if it's simply speak using the present perfect to talk about a place you have visited because teacher says so. That's not a speaking task, it's a grammar activation activity. And it's a pretty poor one anyway, because why would the student want to? Well, teacher told me to. That's not good speaking and it's not good teaching. if we want our students to write, they have a purpose for writing. If we want them to speak in class, we need to give them an understanding of why, back to the overt teaching, but also I believe passionately there needs to be a built-in purpose. But more of that in the speaking masterclass coming up in about a month's time.